Good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in to Let's Live with Thurman Greco on Channel 23, Scenic Downtown Woodstock, and our educational TV channel, which will soon also be on YouTube as well. And we have a very, very interesting show this evening because we have a candidate who is running for office. Can you say who you are and how that came about?
You know, I can, Thurman. Thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate it. And so my name is Bill McKenna. I am presently the town supervisor and running for another term. Last Saturday we had a candidates forum, and you know, I started in talking about some of the accomplishments I had succeeded in over my tenure, and I realized I didn't really talk about my background too much. And you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I guess I kind of assumed that folks knew who I was. So I'm going to take a minute just to maybe reintroduce. We've got a lot of new people in town here who might not know me. I have lived in town for over 33 years. My wife and I, Hillary, first rented a place up on Broadview Road, and then after a couple of years moved out to Hutchin Hill Road in Shady. I've been a contractor in Woodstock here for over 35 years with my brother, my partner, McKenna Brothers. And Hillary and I, she had a son, Jory, who we raised out in Shady. And Hillary and I also have another son, Gabriel. And actually they're 20 years apart. Hillary jokes that a 20-year spacing between siblings is a nice gap. So Hillary and I have been living out there in Shady for, like I said, 33 years. I've spent a lot of time volunteering and working on the town board. I spent 8 years on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I was the chairman of that committee for 4 years. Then went on and got elected to the town board. I've served 11 years on the town board. When Jeremy passed away in 2017, January 1st, I was appointed to fill that year, filled his term, and then went on to win 3 elections. So this is my 7th year as supervisor. So it's a long time. It's over 26 years working either volunteer or as a board member for the town of Woodstock. And even with some of the grief, people always come up and ask me, hey, you know, how do you do it? I actually love the job. I love working. We have a wonderful community, as I think both of you can attest to. And it's just been a great ride. So looking forward to another 2 years. So
You know, there is something to be said for experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you have it. And it's not as if this is your first or second term and there's no history behind it. And Woodstock is a community that likes to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
This community likes to think of itself as forward looking. But Woodstock always has a strong rear view, you know?
There's a lot of history in this community.
And
absolutely.
you don't get anything done in this town if you don't honor that history.
I absolutely agree with you. You know, when I took over for Jeremy, let me step back. When I ran for town board, I almost felt guilty because I'd only been living in town for about 14 years, and part of me felt like I didn't know the history enough, that you know, I didn't have a full understanding for that history, and you know, how could I govern a town? And you know, I've been blessed, first blessed with Jeremy's mentorship. It was one of the best relationships I've had in my life, and I think we would both agree we were both teacher and mentor, teacher and student to one another. He often said he learned as much from me as I learned from him, and it was a very interesting team. We really bolstered each other's strengths, and our own strengths complemented the other's shortcomings or weaknesses, and I still miss him to this day. It was great working with him. I often wish he was around to talk about different issues,
Don't we have some issues in this town that were here when you moved here?
Oh yeah, housing is, I mean, they've been talking about housing for years and years now. And, you know, we've made some progress. We have the RUPCO projects that I'm very proud of down behind Bradley Meadows. I actually, probably once a month, maybe every 6 weeks, I'll actually drive in there just to take a look at it. And it's fascinating to me because you can go in there and there are young families and kids playing and bikes, and they're out playing ball. It's a great little community back in there, and a true asset for the town. But we need to do more. And you know, speaking of affordable housing, we've got a great committee that I put together that is dealing with it, and they came back with what I guess I could call a three-pronged approach. Where they talked about short-term, intermediate, and long-term. And one of the options, and actually Family of Woodstock is administering the program, is a home share program where they're putting together, I guess in most cases it's more senior Woodstock residents with younger residents. And you know, the senior folks may have a home but are finding it a little harder to stay in, or you know, need some help, and they're combining these folks. I think they've had 3 or 4 matches to date, and it benefits everybody, including the community. So that's an exciting program, and as I said, in their first year, I believe, first year and a half, they've already had 3 matches. There's another program that we're working to get off the ground. The Woodstock Housing Alliance is a newly formed not-for-profit, and they're working through their incorporation and whatnot. And during the pandemic, the town got just about $600,000 in ARP funding, American Rescue Plan funding. Basically, the federal government was giving out money to keep the economy rolling. And the town, we've committed under my leadership about 68 to 70% of that funding to help with the housing project. So we put money towards the home share with that. We're also, with the Housing Alliance, looking to create a short-term loan program, low interest, where you may have a home that you could have an affordable rental unit in, but maybe you need another bathroom, or maybe you need to put a separation wall in. So you could get these loans to help create these apartments. And so that's another program that I hope to see implemented and up and running within the next year. The third and the biggest allocation of funding was to look into and work on feasibility and engineering to take one of the town parcels. We've got we've probably got 4 or 5 different parcels in town that we're not really using for anything, that we might be able to see an affordable housing complex built. And I know that one is looking very promising. The town engineer is looking into this. So I'm excited that, you know, that could be another RUPCO style project. And, you know, I know when RUPCO came out, it was a little controversial. People were concerned, but I think if you look at their track record, they've done a great job back there. So it's exciting that's on the horizon. So hopefully those things won't solve all the problem, but hopefully it goes a ways to
so you're thinking about including RUPCO in this one.
So, you know, we wouldn't necessarily include RUPCO. What we would do is, what we would legally have to do is put out a proposal. It could be an RFP or an RFQ. There are different legal ways for the town to do this. But basically, simply put, we would come up with a concept and we would say, okay, any and all bidders who are interested, give us your proposal to take this piece of property and create affordable housing. And Family of Woodstock has now gotten more involved with housing. They may put in a bid. This Housing Alliance, this new not-for-profit, is potential that they could put a bid in. I am almost certain that RUPCO would respond as well. So it wouldn't automatically be RUPCO, the town wouldn't go out and pick them, but we would have everybody put in their offer, and we would analyze that and then pick the best one.
You know, I was here when RUPCO came in, and there was a lot of resistance.
Yes.
But by the time the people moved in, that resistance was beginning to melt.
Yes.
And within a year, the resistance was gone.
Yes.
That community has been such an addition
Yes,
to
absolutely.
our town.
You know, it was interesting because the first time RUPCO came up to do a presentation, it was up at the new firehouse in Bearsville, and it was probably my first year as a town board member. And I'll never forget Billy Van Cleek, who was, I think, the chair of the Republican committee at that point, an old local contractor, pretty conservative, and he slammed his hand on the table and said, "We need this. This is what we need." And that's what really got me hooked initially on RUPCO. You know, if an individual like Bill could, if he's looking at this, you know, because liberals a lot of times will talk about housing and whatnot, but you know, this individual, he could come out and say that this is important. It really hooked me, and I think they're a great organization. There was a lot of concern about where it was being built, and it took a long time for them to get through the process. There's no doubt about it. But I think at the end of the day, honestly, I probably lost a lot of friends over that. And
Did you really?
There were a lot of people very upset. It cost me, if you remember, I was off the town board for 2 years.
Yes.
It cost me an election. That and I think the cell tower, but my affordable housing position. And but any of those folks who had hard feelings of that, every one of them and I are back on good terms, and they've become very supportive and whatnot. So I think ultimately, you know, people came around and said this is a good thing. You know, we're all human. I mean, change is always difficult and it's scary. I get that. And I think none of us can say, oh, I wouldn't care, I wouldn't. I think we'd all be, you know, worried, okay, what is this going to look like? And sometimes you just have to have a little faith and trust, and they're a great organization. So they had such a rough time initially that after they got that built, it's probably my first year in office as supervisor, and I called up Kevin O'Connor, who I'm good friends with, and I said, Kevin, would you come back to Woodstock? I can't repeat on air what he told me, but it wasn't nice. And basically it was a no. And then he chuckled a little bit, but you know, I think at this point they're ready to come back, and this is not a Woodstock issue, it's a national issue.
Well, the thing about RUPCO is that when they come back, they're going to come back in with a reputation that's very positive.
Yes, yeah.
And they defend their reputation with every building that they participate in.
Right.
So it's going to be, if they get it, it's going to be. What are some other things that are on the horizon for Woodstock? It has changed so much in the last few years.
You know, we're constantly looking at different things. The zoning law is a living, breathing document. It's continually being adjusted and amended. And you know, God bless Councilwoman Laura Rickey. She has been the backbone of a group of people who have helped implement a lot of these amendments. One of the issues, probably, if I think about it, one of the greatest achievements I think I've seen is the adoption of a new comprehensive plan. So Woodstock's previous plan had been adopted in 1963 or 4, which is before I was born. And Jeremy, when he came back his second term, kind of started to put in motion the idea of a comprehensive plan. And he set the ball for me on the tee. And when I came and took over in 2017, we were ready to go. And I think it took us about 18 months, and we actually, with very little controversy, put together a committee that worked with a great planning group out of Albany. And we had that written, adopted, and we were working off it within the 18 months. And the comprehensive plan, for those who don't know, it's really a roadmap for where the community wants to head in the next 10 to 12 years. And probably as we get close to 10 years, we'll want to take a look at that plan and amend it and update it and maybe tweak it or change it, or I doubt throw it out, but anything's possible. But I doubt we'd go that far. But it's given us a roadmap. And two of the most critical thing they talked about was the need for housing. The second most critical thing was the need to protect the environment. And Woodstock has always been pretty strong on that front. I think we were the first county, or the first town in the county to adopt an anti-fracking bill. We were one of the first to adopt a carbon neutral policy. We've got a strong watercourse and wetlands law. And I can see that we'll continue to update those and make sure that we keep those strong as we progress. One of the things we worked with Steve Romine. We adopted a section to the zoning law that regulates cell towers, and in particular, before that, Woodstock actually had a pretty good law, but when it was written 30 years ago, nobody knew about these little antennas and the 5G. And we've put in place a law. You can't stop it, but you can regulate it and assure that we do it in a healthy and respectful way that benefits the community and doesn't harm the community. So I think we're going to continue to work on things like that.
Is anybody talking solar in Woodstock these days?
So we do have, years ago, we did get a grant to do 2 small solar projects. We have a 16.5, 17 kilowatt system on the highway garage, and we have a system about the same size on the town hall. I would say about 5 years ago, there was a group, actually I think they're the same outfit that did the solar project on the Saugerties landfill. And they'd come to the town, and David Gross was very involved with them, and we'd spent a lot of time talking and reviewing, and they were proposing to put up a field on the Woodstock landfill. And I was very excited about it, enthusiastic about it, and they were going to come to a town board meeting Tuesday night, and Tuesday at lunch, I got an email from them, they were canceling. And I never got the clear story. There's definitely one issue that I know was going to take work to overcome, is that the power lines that go past the landfill are single phase. And to do solar, to do a big power project like that, you need to have triple phase so that you can put all that energy back on the lines. And the talk at the time, it would be somewhere $1.5 million to $2 million to get triple phase there. So I'm not sure if all of a sudden somebody realized this is going to cost us a lot of money to do that. The other thing that they kind of hinted at is that it was suggested that somebody took a look at the satellite image of the landfill, and on I guess it's the northern end of the landfill, there's a quarry that's filled in with water. And I think they got spooked thinking that it was a wetlands that needed buffers and boundaries. And so never got a clear picture of what chased them off, but that kind of went away. And then we had the pandemic, and we haven't had much motion on that, except that maybe 2 months ago they started to talk about another group was interested. So I know that there's at least one group looking at our landfill. I think it would be beneficial. The town itself, all the town buildings are all signed up to receive our electric from the hydro dams down in the southern end of the county. So the town is already benefiting from green energy and a savings. That their rate fluctuates with Central Hudson's, but they're 10% less. So we're paying 90 cents on the dollar for whatever Central Hudson would be billing. So the town itself is fortunate. There have been some other discussions potentially about, for instance, down in the parking lot here, maybe doing a carport type thing where we would, the parking itself would be covered by panels. But there was a group that was interested and they kind of faded away a little
They
bit.
backed away?
Yeah.
What are some things that people are talking to you about? Do people, I'm sure that people do come up to you on the street or pick up the phone and say, gee, does anybody talk to you about speed limits or sidewalks or
All of that. So speeding is probably, I probably get more calls about that than anything.
really?
And, combined. And it's not any one location. There's one woman out in Colebrook Road that I spend a lot of time chatting with. And I know Glasgow Turnpike can be difficult. So we do a couple of things. One, a number of years ago, I convinced the police chief that we should get some radar signs, the speed limit signs. And we bought 2 of them. And I did get a little pushback. But the highway superintendent was so impressed, he went out and bought a 3rd one. And he uses them, the highway department will set it up on a big construction site. And so if they're blacktopping a road, they may have it just before the road. And it's just a little wake up for when people go by, they realize that they may be going a little too quick. But what I do with the other 2 is we rotate them around. We'll put them out for a week. So if you call me and tell me you have speeding on Tannery Brook, what we'll do is we'll set that sign out there for a week. And we program the speed of the road in. And if you're doing okay or within a mile or 2, it'll be green. Any more than a mile or 2 over and you get a red flashing. Actually, I think it turns red if you're going too fast.
What you're saying is that I can call you up on the phone and say, listen, go over there to Schoonmaker and put one up.
Yes. So we just had one actually by the sledding hill on Tinker Street. So this does a couple of interesting things.
Bill McKenna, you do some fancy things once in a while.
Yeah, I guess so. One of the interesting things that it does is it creates a report. And the report tells us how many cars have been through, how fast they're going, how many people are going over the limit. And you'd be surprised, but in almost every instant, and we've been doing this for now 5 years, there are not as many speeders as you would think there are. Now, there are some roads that are worse than others, there's no doubt about it. But if you got 15 to 20% of the cars going over the limit, that would be pretty high in most cases. So, and I'm not saying that we still don't have a problem. Even 10% going too fast is a problem. But the number of speeders is never really as bad as most people anticipate. And I think that gives homeowners or the residents a little comfort to know, okay, maybe the problem's not as bad. The other thing that it does is that when you do set this sign out and you are caught with that flashing light, it does force people to think about it. And I think that at least short term, 3, 4, 5 months, we see a reduction in speed on those roads. So moving it around does help. We have also from time to time, for instance, the other day, we were getting a lot of calls on Colebrook Road. And I said, Chief, you gotta send somebody out. So we did have somebody go sit for an hour or 2. And first, there weren't that many cars. And I think out of the 10 or 12 cars in an hour, there was one speeder that he gave a ticket to. So we do move the guys around. More often than not, they're not seeing a lot of speeders. And more often than not, when they do stop somebody, it's a resident. It's somebody who lives right there. And, you know, we're probably all a little you're always more comfortable at home, so maybe you step on the gas a little bit more. So sidewalks are another issue we're dealing with. So 3 years ago, 4 years just before the pandemic, you might remember we did the Mill Hill Road project. And most of those sidewalks, they weren't replaced, but there were a few bad sections that were replaced. But every crossing, street crossing, new curbing was put in for ADA compliance. So from the beginning out by Bank of Green all the way up to the Village Green, they were all ADA compliant there. The state has finally, after years of putting pressure, they're looking to do from the Village Green out to the library. So that's the last piece of 212 from Saugerties to Shandaken that needs to be paved.
Wow.
And they will be replacing all the sidewalk between those two locations. And they're actually going to be creating, the sidewalk has almost been lost on what I'll call the eastbound side of the road. So they're going to replace that and put all new sidewalks in through there. So it's going to increase accessibility, mobility throughout town. I know there was some hope about bike paths, but that's going to be, there's not a lot of room there.
That was my next question, because now we have all these bikers.
That's going to be tough. They're actually finding it difficult even to try and get the sidewalk in because of the narrowness. Some of those houses, particularly on the eastbound lane, if you look, they're pretty close to the road. So they're confident they'll get the sidewalk in, but it's going to take some effort.
Now the county's doing that?
No, so that's 212, even Tinker Street, Mill Hill is all part of Route 212. That's a state highway.
Oh, so the state is doing
So
that?
the state will be coming in.
Well, if the state is doing it, then I have every confidence that it will be done well. I am so proud of how the state of New York takes care of its roads and its people, and
they've been very good to deal with. I think we anticipated construction next year, but as everyone else is finding out, it's hard to get contractors and subcontractors, and the state actually needs to contract out some of the engineering work. And they're just, all the engineers are so busy and in such high demand, they're having a hard time. So the last I heard, I think the project might be pushed back to the expectation that it would start in 2025.
wow.
But again, this is a big project. There are the driving factor behind this is that there were 4 bridges on that stretch. Not very big ones, but 4. And they all need to be replaced. They're starting to deteriorate and age and whatnot. And also, you know, with climate change, we're seeing not more rain necessarily, but we're seeing actually fewer storms, but more intense, and it's causing flooding. So one of the things that the state does whenever they do these projects is, you know, any ditches or culverts or bridges all gets enlarged. So they'll be enlarging all those. So again, that's going to take more room because that means the bridges are longer and they're wider and they're adding the sidewalks. So it's a complicated project. I believe the price tag, they've budgeted $25 to $28 million. So it's not an insignificant project.
Wow.
So.
I want to change the subject just 1 minute
Sure.
here. And who owns the Village Green anymore?
So the Dutch Reformed Church owns.
Still owns it?
Yes.
Okay.
So except for there's a sliver on, I guess, the eastern end that the town actually owns. So if you look, as you come up 212, that first flower bed, that little section there is the town's.
So, but the part over there where it kind of comes together like that,
At the
and there's a
point.
police car there.
That's all the
that
church.
belongs to
Yeah.
to the.
Yeah, right up to roughly where the drumming circle is.
Okay.
Is all. So, but the town and the church did, back in 2003 or 4, we signed an easement, a conservation easement with the church. So, and this has come up in other things, municipalities can't spend public money on private property. So, but because we created this easement, and part of the easement says that, this property will be open to the public and the town will maintain it and protect it. So, it was in my first term, I'm going to say 2005, is when we actually took the grass up and we put the bluestone down and all the flower beds. And the town's been maintaining and taking care of it ever since. And it's been a great relationship between the town and the church. So any significant thing, people can meet and greet and hang out there. It's all open to the public. But if you wanted to say have the Women's March, they've done a few things on there. Any of those things have to get approval from both the church and the town. And typically we send, if somebody calls up and says, hey, I want to play some music on the village green. There was actually a band from somewhere in Africa, a marimba band, and they were here last summer, and I think they're coming back this year. And so I said, okay, we'll go talk to the church and get their approval. But the town usually just signs off if the church is good with it. And so that's worked out really well. It's a great meeting space. And, I know for years it was problematic. The grass had looked great for 3 weeks, and then it'd be worn out and it'd become a muddy mess or a dust bowl when it was too dry. And now, every time I go by there are people hanging out. The benches are great. It's a great place to congregate. So, yeah, that's still theirs, though.
That's very interesting, and of course, that brings us to a segue there. What's going to happen with the sidewalks and everything in the area, and the parking? I hear people talk about the crowds all the time.
So when we did the last project on Mill Hill, we actually, if you look down, the parking ended right by Catskill Mountain Pizza. We were able to add 17 parking spaces along Mill Hill Road there, down past the lumberyard, including a handicap spot. So I anticipate that as this project comes in, we won't be losing parking. We might even through marking pick up a spot or two.
Well, I will say this, the parking spaces that you made are very popular.
Yes.
They are extremely popular. And the parking lots, the town parking lots are full all the time.
One of the, and I'll give Jake Wayne credit for this, he helped push this and worked with me on this. If you recall, Mountain View parking lot, people would just roll in. There was, it was a big gravel area. And we put up fencing, we put up parking delineators, we actually paved, I believe we created 4 or 5 paved handicap spots right there at the entrance. And it's really made that a better functioning lot now, where we can get a full complement of folks in there. The other parking lot is still doing great. We've got spots over there. We did lose 1 or 2 because we put the car charging stations in there. And actually, I think we have 2 charging stations right out the door here too, which get utilized.
They get used a lot.
Yeah, they do. I was
They're
amazed.
very popular.
I was here on Tuesday night. There was a housing meeting here, and I came down for a little while to check out on that. There were 2 cars out here charging.
Yeah.
So, and as much as these get used, the 2 down in town by the public bathrooms are even more utilized. So,
Are there any plans for more public bathrooms?
no, but that's not something we couldn't talk about. That'd be interesting. Trying to remember, those were built back in the late 80s, I guess, or early 90s. And we do have public bathrooms down at the town hall, which are open 24/7. And actually, during the winter, when it gets really cold and the crowds diminish, we sometimes close up the bathrooms here. But those bathrooms are always open. So, that's something that really you're the first person that's probably ever mentioned that. So it's food for thought. So to add something somewhere along the lines.
Has anybody talked to you about music?
Yes. That's a hot topic, and I won't go into it too much because we vowed that we wouldn't discuss it in public, but I did appoint an 8-member task force. I guess you'd say I was the 9th member, and I hate to put it this way because I hate to say like it's different sides, but basically we have 4 folks, for better or worse, that would be more pro-venue, and we have 4 folks who would like more silence. And we've met about 4 times now. We took a little break with Memorial Day, and we'll meet in a week. But I feel it's a great group. I feel they're really listening to the concerns of each other, and I'm very confident that we're going to come back with some really good recommendations on how to move forward. There was a noise. It wasn't a noise ordinance, but there was a section in the zoning law that regulated noise, and it didn't actually ban outdoor music. It said that the planning board could, on occasion, if they were doing a site plan review for a property, could deem that they needed to have indoor music, but it didn't automatically ban it. And we were starting to have a lot of trouble with the STRs, with the B&Bs, and noise and big parties and whatnot. And it was at that point where we said, okay, we're going to take it out of the zoning law. We're going to have a standalone law, and we're going to have the police enforce it. So the building inspector, they work 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. They're not here at midnight when there may be a noise problem. The police, we've got 24/7. But when we wrote it, the problem was the STRs, the B&Bs, and we didn't have a huge outdoor music problem in town. And the law works great for the B&Bs. That problem went away. But then with the pandemic, and I had instituted a state of emergency where we let businesses, they could come in and apply to make changes to their business plan without having to go through the planning board process, which could be long. So that we were letting them do temporary changes. And what we were doing is I had one fellow who was overseeing this, and he would go out and just make sure that what they were doing was going to be safe. And so that's where a lot of this outdoor music came up from. And I said to each of them, I said, look, if you like what you're doing, when the pandemic's over, you have to stop, but you can go back to the planning board and ask for permission. And for instance, the Colony has done that, where they've gone back, and the planning board has worked with them. I think, my hat's off to the Colony. They've spent a lot of money, and they're really trying to, they took the stage, and it used to kind of face the center of town, and they turned it so that now it faces their building, and they're enclosing the stage to kind of keep the music more directional. The Bearsville Center has, they do some outdoor music, which all went through the planning board, and they utilize mini speakers throughout the outdoor seating area. And I was up there for an event, the Land Conservancy had an event there, and it was really quite nice. And I know they've hit it on it well, I believe, because I haven't had any complaints from those neighbors. But in town, we're still dealing with it, and I think we'll get there, though. Like I say, this is a really good group, and if people really talk to one another, I think more often than not, we have far more in common than what separates us. And when we start to talk about what separates us, if we're really truthful about it, I think we find ways to overcome that. So I tell people all the time, Jeremy Wilbur and I probably never started a discussion on any issue where we were in sync. It was, I'm not going to say we were always 180 degrees apart, but we were somewhere on that spectrum, and we'd just keep talking about it in a civil, polite, courteous, respectful tone, and I don't think we had a single issue that we weren't able to resolve in all our years together. So, I think people just need to focus on that. So,
What do you think are your biggest problems?
Biggest problems, personally, or just in general in town?
In town. Either way, I'll take them both.
Town is changing, and I think change causes most of us to recoil a little bit, to be concerned, and there's no doubt it's changing a lot. We have an influx of folks. It's getting harder and harder for instance, my son, he lives down in Kingston. He could not afford a place in Woodstock. So it's getting harder and harder for young people to stay here. The makeup of the town is changing. And I think we just have to keep looking at that, focusing on that, and working to, I don't think you can stop change, because if you're not continually evolving, I think things die. And but I think there's a way to manage change. I think that's what we need to keep trying to do. I've said it a lot of times too. Make a lot of mistakes in a day. I hit a wall. I step back and then go left or right. And I think we can't be afraid to try new things, and if they don't work, change go in a different direction. When we adopted the noise ordinance, it was actually, we got this law from over the village of Saugerties, and it was not based on decibels or the level of noise, but it was based on what a reasonable person found unreasonable, which is pretty vague. But we did find that there was a similar law out in Rochester or Syracuse that had been tested and made its way up through the state Supreme Court and had won. So we felt that, okay, this is worth trying. But when we adopted it, we said, look, we're going to try this, and we may have to tweak it. And here we are, we're working to tweak it. The same with the short-term rentals. I remember the whole board, we all said, look, we're going to adopt this. We're the first town in the county to do this. And we're pretty sure there are some mistakes here. It's not a perfect law. But again, we've got a committee looking at, what's working, what's not working, how do we need to change this. The STRs is an interesting issue because I don't know if it's split 50-50, but there's a lot of people that just don't want to see them at all. And there's a lot of people who want to, anybody who wants one can do one. And then there's the middle ground that, looking for some middle grounds. And I had a woman call me today upset. She had just bought a house or built a house in 2019, and she went down to the county. Well, she just finished it. She started in 2019. She just went down to the county to get her tax ID number to do her STR, and they, of course, gave it to her. And then she came up to Woodstock to put in her application. We said, the cap's full. There's nothing available. And, so naturally she's frustrated and, hoping to get a little income to help supplement the bills in that house. And there are some people that would literally like to see a wall go up around town and have no tourists. And then you've got shopkeepers who live and die by the number of people here on a weekend. So that, to me, is probably one of the biggest issues, aside from the fact we need a housing. That's a big one, and trying to to find a balance there.
Something that it's not even being discussed, but the library, as it is over there on Library Lane, that's a big piece of land.
Yeah, and at some point...
And then right next to it is Lasher's.
Yes.
That is a huge piece of land.
So Lasher's at one point...
So we're going to put a hotel there? We're going to put a bunch of Airbnb, what has anybody talked about it?
So Lizzie Van has purchased that, and she's the energy behind the Bearsville Center. And she has, and I guess this is public, she's talked about it in the paper. She did come and see me a couple of weeks ago, and she's got some interesting ideas that circulate a lot around music and the arts, including some small performance space, the potential for an art gallery, and some type of museum centering around music and the arts. So those are some interesting things. She's also talked about committing to doing some affordable rentals in one of the buildings for artists or musicians, which would be a great benefit. And nothing she said indicated anything about a motel or a hotel, so I was happy to hear that. So, and she's got a couple of other little things tied in with that, but I remember she left and I felt really good about the and these are just general broad concepts at this point, but I was cautiously optimistic. What she, I don't know her finances, what she does with the library, that'll be interesting to see. The library does have to sell that building because they're counting on the sale of that to help with their renovations up at the new building, so time will tell.
Are people coming in there complaining to you about that?
For me, that's dropped off the radar altogether. Early on when they...
Hey, you like it when things drop off the...
Absolutely. I hear little rumblings now and then, but it's nothing concrete. My guess is there are still a few folks who are not thrilled that it's moving. In a perfect world, you could say this is what we want or this is what we need. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a very imperfect world where we have a lot of constraints. And in a perfect world, you could say, yeah, the library should be right in the middle of town where people can walk to it. At the end of the day, though, it'll be up on Dixon Avenue, and the folks that live up in the flats can all walk to it now. And the UCAT, the county bus, which is now free, has vowed to help with with running a bus up through there. So, there are going to be options. Actually, one of the things we talked about, I forget what we called it, the library route or something, where they might run between the Shandaken Library, the Woodstock Library, and the Hurley Library, the West Hurley Library. So, that could be something interesting that comes to fruition. But no, the library had an open house there about 2 weeks ago. They had fantastic turnout. There seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm and energy generated there. So I think they're over the hump.
Have the people in Woodstock or people in Ulster County or people in New York or whatever, are there community supported or community financed people who are studying gentrification? Is that something that's on the radar screen at all?
I suppose we all, I wouldn't say that we use that word necessarily, but I think...
What are we using now?
I think that we're all paying attention and concerned and trying to be very cautious about development and overdevelopment. And, because remember, and some people could argue these are in conflict, but from the comp plan, the two biggest issues for Woodstock, lack of affordable housing and save the environment. So lack of affordable housing, almost everybody is now admitting that the way to deal, we need to create housing. So that means we need to build housing. At the other side of the coin is, though, that we want to protect our environment. One of the interesting things, so we're in the process of doing a revision to the zoning law. And we've been working on this now for 3 years. And, we've got a document now that it's in the second version. And, we've really tightened it up. We took a lot of comments last year when it was reviewed by various boards and the public. And, one of the things they look at is, so presently in our zoning law, say you have 100 acres and you look at the density and you can divide that 100 acres into 25-acre lots. The new law is going to look at, first off, removing all the environmentally sensitive areas from the 100 acres and then working your density off that. So it may reduce the number of houses, but then we're looking and cluster them so that, instead of having 25-acre lots, you've got, a bunch of houses right here all on maybe a half an acre, and the 80 acres are over here and protected, and, they have conservation easements, and they become a park area for the property owners. So I guess in a sense, without saying the word gentrification, this committee is looking at that. We want to keep that country feel. Some people would scream, oh, Woodstock is being destroyed, this is a disaster and whatnot. And I would argue, because we have been so successful in protecting our environment, our water, our trees, folks want to come here and they're willing to spend money to do that. And it's a double-edged sword because, those of us who've been here a while are finding it harder and harder to stay, but we're a victim of our own success in a lot of ways. But I'm optimistic that these potential zoning changes could actually increase the number of units but downsize them. One of the things it talks about is doing a triplex or a quad. So that's where you have four housing units in one building. And the reality is, if you look, actually the one person I talked to today who wanted the SDR, she built a 3,700 square foot house. So you could put 4 800 square foot apartments in there. And, most couples could live on 800 square feet very easily. So, the concept is you can build this house that looks like this big single house and put 4 or 5 apartments in there. And they're single. So, in the big house, you could have a family of 5 or 6 living there. Whereas if you had all single units, you still only have 5 or 6 people there. It's no bigger burden, but you're helping more individuals. So those are things that we're looking at.
When you are in a small community, and I think of us as being in a small community, do you meet with other small communities? Do you have conventions? Do you have
one of the
seminars?
One of the most enjoyable groups that I participate, the Supervisors Association, Ulster County Supervisors, and so there are 20 towns in Ulster County and the city of Kingston. We invite the mayor, and there are 3 villages, Saugerties, New Paltz, and Ellenville. So there are the 4 mayors and 20 supervisors. And, unfortunately, their meeting is on the morning of the town business meeting. So I can't always get to the meeting. But we continually have email chains, where an email will go out to a couple of weeks ago, somebody wanted to know about development and building fees. So I sent an email out, hey guys, what are each of you doing? And I got 20 emails back with the different fees. That's a great asset. And it's interesting too, because I don't know if it's evenly split, but there are a number of Republicans and a number of Democrats who never talk party politics. And it's really just nice. We're all there to help each other. We all have, I guess it's comforting to know that you get a problem and you're shaking your head, and then you talk to 20 other people, and they all have the same problem. So it's very comforting. But that's a great one that I belong to, that the town takes part in. And Jeremy did. You're waving to me?
She is telling us that we have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
And this is our opportunity to thank Ellen for all that she's done for us. And it's my opportunity to thank you. I swear, you're great. You come across beautifully.
Thank you.
Can you, is there a possibility that you can come back again?
Oh, I'd love to. Sure.
I think
Be delighted.
I'd like, first of all, to have you come in with a couple of 3 people so that the
Sure.
conversation isn't between you and me,
Sure.
but between you and the other people. And then once you're in office,
Okay. I'll come once a month.
it would
Yeah.
be great. This would make so much difference. People do watch this program. People are interested in this program. And whether they are new or old residents, they've all got opinions. And they want to know what's happening.
Absolutely. Do you ever do call-ins?
I have not done
Okay.
call-ins in many years.
Yeah. I used to do that with Sam Mercer, and I remember the first time I went to do it, and I said, "What the heck if I don't know the answer?" And I just said, "Look, if I don't know the answer, I'll have it for you next Saturday." And
You've had the answer so far to everything I've brought
I've gotten a
up.
little better with the answers. Yes, I was pretty young at that point. I just want to say, Ellen, thank you too for you are the heart and blood of this
She is.
studio,
She is.
and thank you for keeping it going.
Yes, that's really what she does too.
But no, I'm happy to come on anytime.
Okay. Well, we hope to see you next week with a couple of
I will
friends.
be back, and you know what? Maybe after that, I'll come back with Jackie Early, the town clerk, or
That would be great.
the highway superintendent.
And also, I want somebody from the police department, and I want somebody from the fire department.
You got it. I'll work on
You
that.
never hear anybody
Right,
talk about the police or the fire.
right.
And, when
We're
we
lucky.
need
We've
them.
got 2 great and yeah, when we need them, they're there.
Yeah.
So yes,
And I think our fire department needs our support.
they do.
And the evidence.
And the ambulance, yes. So those are all things that we have not. I was talking to Ellen yesterday, and I told her then, I said, we need to, we have a lot of new residents. And they are watching the program. They are commenting. They are participating in the program. So now they can learn about what their community offers.
Right. And I do feel a lot more questions now from folks who are just moving up who don't understand. Somebody called me a couple of months ago. When do I get my water bill and who do I pay? And I said, well, where do you live? They lived in Willow. I said, well, you run a private well. I had no idea what a private well was. But I had the opportunity to explain this, and they were much relieved that they didn't have to worry about a water bill. So, and that's getting more and more common where folks are a little unsure about how it all operates. So,
Yes, I used to joke that my neighbors would say, who's the supervisor? Who's the super? And I would say, hey, you're looking at him. He's you. You're the super.
there you
Well,
go.
thank you very, very much. So we'll see you next week.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you. Say good night.
Good
Good night.